Every man has his heroes, and every life is made up of stories. Heroic Stories is a series from heroicmen.org to find out why some men choose the harder path in life, even when it means losing everything, how they survived, and who they are today. These men seem heroic to us, even if they don't call themselves that. They seem to have an extra strength in their system, extra grit to battle doubt and find purpose. All of these men are seeking divine friendship with God, and they all believe in building up faith, building up men, and building up our future. Sponsored by CatholicSpeakers.com and hosted by Dominic from Heroic Men, get the mindsets, the scars, and the playbooks that these men have earned the hard way. Heroism isn't born, it's made, and these are their stories. Hi friends, and welcome back to Heroic Stories. I'm your host, Dominic from Heroic Men, and I'm joined today by Garrett Hines, an iconographer, all-around artist, watercolorist. Seems like a generally amazing guy. Welcome, Garrett. Good to have you on.
Thanks so much, Dominic. I am very excited to be here, have this conversation with you, and talk about what it means to be a man.
Likewise. Well, the endorsement for you comes from the top of Heroic Men. Robert Tunmeyer loves your work, deeply appreciates what it is you're putting down, and so I'd like to get into that and hear about it. The way that the show is structured is we want to talk about heroism. That's kind of a theme of our brand, of our mission. The thing is that men will often define or live out heroism in all kinds of different ways, and not all of it is like a lot of chest beating, diving into D-Day with machine guns. Some of it can be being a hero for somebody else, not even on your own terms, but on somebody else's terms. So it's not about ego, but it is about showing up and trying to do the right thing, even when it feels boring or impossible. Probably like taxes, I suppose. So I'm curious for you, Garrett, if I were to ask you a question, what is a story of heroism that absolutely lights you up? Where would you go with that?
I would tell you a story about a guy that I am willing to bet most men and most Catholics do not know, and that is a guy named Beninus. And I'm going to tell you his story by telling you a story of my patron saint, St. Patrick. So in the hagiography of St. Patrick, there's a story where he ends up in a castle, and he's basically trying to convert the king. And the king has a group of druids with him. And for those that don't know, druids in ancient Ireland are basically like magicians, religious leaders. They are the ones in charge of the spiritual practice of Ireland. And so the king has a very well-known druid with him. And St. Patrick comes to this dinner, and he wants to challenge, he wants to convert the king. And the druid challenges him to a contest. And the king says, the only way to know if your God is greater than the God of my druids is to have a test. And we're going to do a series of 3 basically events. And so the druid steps up and he tells St. Patrick, he says, call on your God and cover the land in snow. And this is, if I remember right, it's either early fall or late spring.
This is straight up Moses level drama here.
Yeah. Oh, and it's one of the things about St. Patrick that I love so much, because most people, all they know is the March holiday and the beer and the green. But his story is just like why we have not made movies out of this guy, I do not understand. Mm-hmm. But the druid steps up and he says, cast snow all over the land. And St. Patrick looks at him and he says, no, I'm not going to act against God's will. I will not do that. And the druid said, well, I will. So he calls on whatever he calls on, and he casts his incantations, and he covers the entire land in snow. And that's how it's recorded. The whole land is covered in snow. And St. Patrick is like, okay, fair enough. Make the snow go away. And the druid looks at him and he's like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that until, and this is the funniest part to me, I can't do that till tomorrow afternoon. And I'm like, you sucker, you're waiting for it to get hot. That's cheating. And St. Patrick looks at him and he says, all you can do is bring death, but my God brings life. And he prays, and the snow gone. And the whole land is right back to just how it was before the snow. And of course, the king is impressed. And so the druid steps up and he goes, okay, well, cover the whole land in darkness. And St. Patrick, I imagine it like St. Patrick rolls his eyes. It's like, oh, good heavens. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. And the druid says, well, I'll do it. So he casts his spell, calls forth a series of demons, covers the whole of the castle in darkness. And St. Patrick's like, okay, make it go away. And the druid is like, I can't do that. St. Patrick prays, And of course, the light returns, and the demons flee, and the darkness is gone. And then finally, the king is like, okay, we're going to put this to the ultimate, like, be all end all contest. We're going to have a contest by water. We're going to take both of your holy books. We're going to throw them in the lake. Whoever's book comes out unharmed, their God is the real deal. And the druid jumps up and he's like, nope, I refuse. Absolutely not going to do it. This guy serves the God of water. Not gonna play around in his game, because the druid knew that St. Patrick baptized in water.
Right.
And St. Patrick's like, okay, fine. What do you want to do? And the king says, well, we'll have a trial by fire. We'll throw the holy books under fire, and whoever's book comes out. And the druid steps up again. He's like, absolutely not. No, every other season, this guy serves the God of fire. I'm not going to compete with that. And St. Patrick finally is like, okay, here's the deal, man. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a hut. Half of that hut is going to be brand new green stick, limb, whatever. The other half is going to be completely dry, kindling, everything. We're going to build this hut. One part completely green, the other part completely dry. You get to go into the green part. And I'll tell you what, you can wear my cloak. And my student, a guy named Beninus, he's going to go in the other half with all the dry kindling, and he'll wear your cloak. Then we'll cast it in fire. Whoever comes out, their God is obviously the deal. And so the druid is like, oh man, this, like, the contest is not going to get any better. This is the easiest win I've ever had. So he agrees. He puts on St. Patrick's cloak. He goes in the half of the hut made out of green sticks. Beninus gets the cloak of the druid, goes in the part with all the dry sticks. They cast the whole thing in fire. The druid and all the green sticks, just like Baal in the days of Isaiah.
Water-soaked altar.
That's exactly right. The whole thing goes up in flames. Everything, the druid, not an ash left except for St. Patrick's cloak. And Beninus stands in the dry wood. The dry wood's completely untouched. He's untouched, but the druid's cloak is gone and it's completely burned up. And I love that story because, like, on the one hand, as men, like, we want to be St. Patrick. We want to go toe to toe and duke it out with evil and be super manly. And we are called to that. And that's 100% legitimate desire. But there are other times where we're called to be the student that's, like, asked to do the crazy things. I can't imagine.
I really hope you know what you're doing.
Man, like, okay, St. Patrick, this is like, I'm going to figure out if you're for real or not, because I'm willing to do this. And I think a lot of times we miss those opportunities where we've been asked as men to, like, go and just say yes to what we're asked. Like, if you're asked to go stand and do a crazy test, maybe you should stand and go do a crazy test and see what God does, because it ends up being pretty amazing. So that's the story of Beninus. I love that story. I love the conflict with the druid, but the whole of it is just, I want to be the guy that says yes to what God asked me to do.
Okay. Man, what an incredible story. Okay, where did you hear this story first? And then two, why does it matter to you?
So I have several books. You know, when we converted, and I needed to choose a patron saint for confirmation, I landed on St. Patrick, in part because he's Irish, and that's amazing. And I have Irish ancestors, but it wasn't the Irish part so much as, part of my role right now is public school teacher, and it had gotten pretty hard. And I remember sitting down and asking St. Patrick if he would be willing to be my patron saint, because I needed somebody that understood what it meant to be asked to go and be a light in dark places. And if you read the totality of his story, you read his confessions, you read his letter to Coroticus, St. Patrick understood. Ireland in the time of St. Patrick is one of the darkest places in history. I mean, they do some pretty pagan things that are pretty terrible.
Well, it's mostly men listening to this. Go into a little bit of detail, if you would. I love setting the context for why the heroes and the saints that we talk about, we often don't talk about how bad situations were. And right. It was those that forged them to be who they are.
Yeah. So a great example would be, I would really encourage people, if they want to get to know St. Patrick, there's two documents that we know for a fact he wrote. One is his confessions, and it's worth reading just to understand his grasp of the gospel and his love for Christ. But there's this other one called the letter to Coroticus. And Coroticus is this basically tribal leader who comes through the area where St. Patrick is, and he butchers hundreds of newly baptized Christians. And then he takes off a bunch of brand new baptized women to go and do what rebel leaders, tribal leaders like that do with baptized virgins. And St. Patrick, the only thing he can do, because of the limitations of his area and his station, is he writes these letters and sends them out all over Ireland to basically rip Coroticus a new one and communicate to the whole of Ireland, if you harbor this guy, this is the kind of person that you are protecting, and what kind of person are you to do that? And there's other things, other pagan rituals that you see in early fiction stories, but it was what we imagine pre-Christian Europe to be: tribalism, butchery, a lot of raping and pillaging, just a lot of the things that we tend to not think existed in a place like Ireland that is so beautiful and so popular. But the pre-Christian era of Ireland is, there's things they do with animals that still make me vomit. I mean, it's a really dark place. And the druids in postmodern era, there's a real attempt to make druids seem like amazing, super cool people. You know, you think of like Merlin. Merlin was a druid. And I understand where that comes from. I think we've forgotten a little bit about what pagan spirituality really looked like, you know, in the 200, 300, 400 era. And that's the world in which St. Patrick steps into. And part of the thing that makes it so impactful to me is, you know, St. Patrick is not Irish, he's English. And he, at the age of 16, is captured by a bunch of Irish raiders, taken off and sold into slavery, where he basically serves as a shepherd for 6 years. At the end of that 6 years, he receives a vision from God. And after receiving the vision from God, runs 200 miles across the island to a boat he's never seen before, where he is able to prayerfully get himself on the boat and get back to England, or what is England now. And while he's there recovering, he has a vision in which God basically asks him to go back to the land of his enslavement to share the gospel for the rest of his life. And if you read his confessions, he is adamant. Basically, they're going to have to bury me here because I'm not leaving. He takes on, and he's not the first Christian missionary evangelist to go to Ireland. There are others before him that kind of set the stage, but Patrick is the one that just full throttle covers the island in prayer. And, you know, there's another legend of St. Patrick, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard this one, that he drove away all the snakes from Ireland. And it's funny because I've heard, you know, non-Christians, atheists, whatever, and they're like, oh, that proves that Christianity is fake and it's all a bunch of liars and all this stuff because there's never been snakes in Ireland. I'm like, you're missing the whole point, man. The whole point of the story of St. Patrick driving out snakes is the symbolism of what the snake is. The snake is evil. The snake is Satan. And St. Patrick showed up to Ireland and drove Satan out of Ireland. Like, it is the real light stepping into the darkness. And that's why the story of Beninus is so impactful to me, because you look at the hagiography, and basically hagiography is stories of the saints in an era which historical record wasn't as good. Like, we know things about St. Teresa of Calcutta because our historical records are incredible at this point in history, but we didn't have that in the 400s when Patrick is alive. And so you have these stories that kind of become legend, and some of it's hard to figure out. Like, okay, you know, was it all of Ireland that was covered in snow? I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is, the Druid almost killed Ireland. It's not the facts, it's the story. And so these stories become foundational for our faith because it passes on to us the courage, right? It's why the book of Acts is so important. Here's all these stories about the ways that the apostles, with great courage, took the gospel wherever it needed to go. It was wherever God said go, that's where they went. And that's the story of the saints. That's St. Patrick, St. Brigid, you know, all of these incredible Celtic saints that I admire so much.
So I think we'll get more into your story and why the story like that matters so much to you. What was one of the darkest decisions, or not darkest, most difficult decisions you've ever had to make?
Okay, so before my wife and I were Catholic, we were non-denominational evangelical missionaries. And it was actually a rather easy decision to sell everything we own, take our then 4-year-old son and our 5-month-in-the-womb daughter. We were somewhere in 5 to 6 months pregnant. And we sold everything we had, rehomed 2 dogs, sold our house, and moved overseas. And that was actually really easy because we knew in our gut that's what God was asking us to do. And about 6 months in, we were there and things started to go really badly.
Can I ask where you moved to overseas?
Oh yeah. We were in, I'm going to call it Southeast Asia. I still have some friends that live there, and I want to be careful not to pinpoint too closely where they are, because it is not exactly the friendliest place to be.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I mean, it was amazing, and it's a beautiful country and in a beautiful place. But I don't want to mess with the work that they're doing.
Change, I imagine. Sort of a culture
Huge.
shock.
Absolutely, everything was different. The language was different. The way that people live was different. The people we interacted with was different. You know, it was the first time I'd ever been told, like, hey, you need to be careful which parts of town you go to because you're American. And if the police figure out you're American, they're probably going to force you to pay a bribe, and it'll be exorbitant. So don't get caught. And that was a wild experience because there's a lot of corruption in the area that we lived in. About 6 months in, we were basically pulled aside and said, hey, you're not good enough to do this. And that was quite a punch to the face because we had done all the training. We checked all the boxes. Everybody said we were good to go. But about 6 months in, the people we were working with said, hey, we prayed, and we want you to know we prayed. It's really important. We prayed. We feel like, you know, basically God is saying this isn't for you, and that's okay. It's totally fine. It's no big deal. It's not for everybody. And it was heartbreaking. And
what did that mean, though? Like you're not good enough, as in you're not skilled up enough? You're not morally righteous enough? Like,
I would probably pin it as I was not submissive enough. I, by nature, just the nature of growing up, the nature of childhood, the way I'm wired, I don't do authority really well.
Yeah,
and
good company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many creative people out there do, you know, like how many of us do authority very well? And which partly is why it's funny that I'm Catholic now, because authority is a huge deal, right?
That's weird, though. We're like rebels wrestling with authority. Jacob wrestling with the angel. That's like the Catholic thing, the Christian thing. Anyhow, sorry, keep going.
No, yeah, but you're exactly right, though. And I think there's real value, as hard as it is. The wrestling with God is, I think, in part what God wants. I would rather my son fight it out with me over, can I go do this thing? Can I have that thing? Can I stay up this much later? I would rather have that fight with him than him walk off and not talk to me. And that always brings, stuff like that always brings me back to my 3 favorite words in the Bible. Because Jesus is talking and he says, you who are evil know how to give good gifts to your kids. How much more? Like, I do really want that tattoo on my body. How much more does God know how to give good gifts to his children? And that gets me every time. So when I think about things like, I would rather my son fight it out with me. Well, how much more does God want me to fight it out with him? And I think there's real value in the wrestling. I think we underplay wrestling in the faith a lot because we want to go, we want to be pious, we want to do the things, we want to check the right appropriate boxes, and all that's well and good. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But I think if you look at every major player in the Bible, Abraham, Moses, Isaac, Jacob, Peter, Isaiah, David, Paul, they all wrestle with God. They all go toe to toe because they want to know that the thing that they've put their everything in is authentic. And I think you can't get there without the wrestling, without being willing to pull the painting off the wall and really examine, is this thing for real? And if it is, cool, I'm in, I'm all the way. But if it's not, I'm not interested. And I think that's why the wrestling happens. So we were in Southeast Asia and we had just, gone through this whole, you're not, and part of the problem was we were undertaking a task that in my heart, I really believed was wrong. We were setting people up to think they were going to be Christians and giving them no support once all of the short-term people were there. And in the country we were living in, that was a commonplace thing. Groups of people would come in, take over, establish kind of a religious beachhead. The people in the area would be like, yeah, sure, we totally believe. And then nothing about their life would change. And it became kind of this parfait of religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. And I was convinced that's what we were going to be doing. We were going to set these people up to think they were Christians and give them no infrastructure, no understanding, no nothing. And then we're just going to leave. And I became vocal about like, hey, what we're doing, we're not doing it the right way. We could be doing this better. And I think that was a big part of, I didn't have the wisdom or the prudence to say, maybe this is a conversation I need to have in private. Maybe this is a conversation I need to pull the leader aside and be like, hey, I think what we're doing is wrong and for these reasons. And I was way not prepared. Looking back now, I'm like, oh, you poor foolish man. But all of that aside, we were basically told, hey, you're not equipped for this. And so that month after was probably one of the darkest times. I had a brand new baby. She was a month old. My son is 4 and he's having a grand time, just the time of his life. My wife is staying up basically 24/7 because she's so stressed out that she can't nurse our daughter well enough to keep her body weight up. And so she was basically nursing around the clock. We're in an area where we're exposed to burning trash all the time. Like, it was just hard, to the point where my daughter almost got taken to the hospital because she had lost 15% of her body weight in the first 2 weeks. And thankfully, some things got put in place that kind of staved that off long enough. And now I'm thinking, okay, we have to go home. We got to go back. I don't have a job. We don't have anywhere to live. I don't even know if we're going to have any money. I started drinking NyQuil at night just to get a few hours of sleep. Started applying for jobs. Told my dad, I was like, hey, Dad, I need to use your cell phone number because I don't have an American number. Nobody's going to call me with my, Southeast Asian number. If somebody calls you, I need you to call me so that I can use my, we had this workaround. We can make phone calls. And I said, if somebody calls with a job, I need you to call me. And it wasn't so much that the decision was hard. It was the process through which the decisions had to be made. It was basically like, we're going to have to put our life together after what our counselor later called spiritual abuse. And I'm at that moment, there was no part of me that thought I was equipped for that life. It's like, man, we're gonna have to put
which life?
The life of putting everything back together after everything's fallen apart. Our whole world just crashed down. And I don't know where we're going to live, how we're going to live. Are we going to have any money? Are we going to be able to, buy furniture?
Sounds like your faith community back at home didn't really want you coming back there if they were letting you go from the field.
There wasn't.
Or you didn't really want to go back to that?
Well, it was more of a crisis moment. For us, it was wherever. I remember the prayer, and a really good friend of mine, not a part of that community, but a really good friend of mine said, you need to pray and ask God to just open one door. Because if you have to make choices, you're not in a headspace to make choices. So ask God for just one door. And praise God, he did. He gave us one door. And that brought us to where we are now. But no, in our faith community, that was one of the hardest parts. When missionaries in that community come home, it's a big deal. They're brought up in front of the whole church. They're prayed over. They're celebrated. They're touted as heroes. And we came home and we sat in the back and nobody knew we were there. And nobody said, hey, welcome home. It was just miserable. And no, we really didn't want to stay. And thankfully we weren't asked to. I think I would have tried to out of pride, just to stick it out and be like, no, I deserve to be here. But thankfully we were pulled to somewhere else. And if he hadn't, we wouldn't be where we are now. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And I love what I'm doing right now. I've always wanted
a quick sense of what you are doing these days.
Sure. I've always wanted to be a professional artist. When I started teaching, and especially when we got pregnant with my son, I was like, man, I really want to take my art more seriously because that's another stream of revenue for our family. And not only that, but it's when I'm painting, I feel alive the most. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm doing now is I'm an iconographer, and iconography is an ancient sacramental art form that really at the heart of it is about helping people pray. And the funny thing about this, and I've made a couple of YouTube videos about it, is as a Protestant, I hated prayer. I mean, with every fiber of my being.
Really? Why?
Yeah. I think it was because, one of my avenues for creative expression is poetry, and I like to write, and I don't do it because I want to be published, and I do it because it's good for me. And prayer a lot of times for me felt like trying to craft just the right words. And it really was a misunderstanding of the heart of God, because it was like, okay, I have to get the right words in order. And if I can just get the right words in order and I do it at the right time with the right feeling and the right expression, then, okay, I'll have put all the things in the right place, and then God will do the thing I need. That's what I was trying to do. And then we would get to public prayer. And it was like, people would ask, hey, will you pray publicly? And I would do it sometimes. And in my head the whole time, I'm like, no, that can't be the right word. No, don't say it that way. No, this, okay, we'll say that. and it just became a mess. And I hated prayer. And then the worst part came when we were going through this mission crisis, because I remember walking with the team leader and being like, dude, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If I pray, nobody cares, because you're going to pray and we're going to do what you want to do. And if I pray, it doesn't matter what I think. And then, you know what? God's going to do what he wants to do anyways. So why should I even ask? And it was at that point I completely just quit. No prayer. I'm done. And now my whole world revolves around prayer, because as an iconographer, icons are really windows into heaven that help us to see the glory of God, whether it's in his son, or whether it's in the Holy Mother, or whether it's in a saint, or whether it's in a feastal scene. Through those windows, we get pulled into the reality of who God is, so that it shapes us. And the whole purpose of that is a life of prayer. So now
How did you start rediscovering prayer, or thawing out toward it again? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, it was becoming Catholic.
Yeah.
And I know that's maybe that's a cheap selling point, but it really was, because what I discovered was all the written prayers. Okay. I mean, as Catholics, we have written prayers like we have the stars. I mean, they're everywhere, and they're of all kinds. And I remember finding some of the early ones and reading through those, and it was like a cold drink of water in a Texas summer, because it was like, oh, I don't have to think anymore. I can just attach the intention of my heart to these beautiful words that somebody infinitely smarter than me came up with. And I can just say that. And then it was in discovering the Jesus prayer, the FJ in Greek. And the Jesus prayer, the prayer of the heart, is more of an Eastern tradition, but it is just the repetition of Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And when I discovered the Jesus prayer and the Chotki, right? So the Chotki is in the East, what the Rosary is in the West. It was like reigniting a fire that had basically died, because I could just say, okay, Lord, I really care about my wife and kids, and I really care about the souls going through purgatory, and I really care about my priest, and I really care about my brothers in the church, and I really care about all of these things. I'm going to take all of these things that I really care about, and I'm going to give them to you, and I'm just going to pray on their behalf, and I'm going to let that rip until I feel like I'm done. And Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Over and over. And I don't have to think, and I don't have to worry about it. It's in God's hands. One of my other favorite ones is really challenging for me, because if you pray it meaningfully, it will 100% change your life. And Saint Evagrius is a very early saint, celebrated more in the East. And he said once that prayer doesn't have to be all that complicated. He said, all you really need to say is, Lord, have mercy. No, sorry. I said that backwards. Lord, as you will, and as you know, have mercy. And then he goes on to say, if things get really hard, just say, Lord, help. And I took that and ran with it. Now there are days where I'm like, okay, Lord, as you will. Like that, if you pray that with genuine sincerity, your whole world changes, because then I don't have to carve my place in the world. God will do it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so it was the written prayers. The Rosary was kind of the gateway drug for me for converting. And then after the first year of being Catholic, I remember going really hard in the paint, like 4 rosaries a day, really trying to go for it. And then I think it was after 30 days, a month, something, I thought, man, I can't do this. I'm not seeing any fruit from this. This is crazy. And I quit. For a whole year, I quit the Rosary and just did the Jesus prayer. And then this last summer, I have no clue what happened, but there became this kind of, I almost call it like a rhythmic hum in my soul of like, I need to pray the Rosary. And I really don't know why, but I really need to. And, I felt it so deeply. I reached out to this absolutely beautiful woman in our parish, and I knew what she was capable of. And I said, hey, can I commission you to make me a rosary? I need to get back to the Rosary, but I know as an artist, I need something that's like going to ignite that creative spirit in me. Will you make me a rosary? And so she did. And then she would not absolutely refuse to let me pay her for it. And it is my favorite rosary. It is gorgeous. I love it to pieces. It's weighted. It's just right. It's chain instead of string.
And do you have it? Can you show it to us?
I do. Yeah. I had to get it out of my backpack. So I was inspired by this rosary I saw online, and I sent her the specifications, and I said, this is what I would like.
That's beautiful.
So the St. Benedict cross in copper, and all these basically like smoky beads with the blue glass. And then I love the floral miraculous metal that she put on here. Just gorgeous. I love it. So that's my what a friend of mine called my main driver. That one and a rosary that I bought from Catholic Woodworker, and their stuff's just so good. But that one's Our Lady Undoer of Knots, and that's probably my favorite title for the Blessed Mother. Actually, with my past and my background, I have a lot of knots, and so it's a real joy to go to her and to say, Mother, I need this stuff to be undone. And I don't have it. I don't have it in me to fix it. But really, it was the rosary, the Jesus prayer, the written prayers. It took prayer out of this space of like, oh, it's on me. It's on my effort. And it's just, no, I just say these really beautiful words and mean it with my heart, and off we go.
Yeah, I do believe that there are phases of your life where new prayers are needed. And you'll find your prayer routines will shift, they'll change, and this is what happened for me anyway. You'll lose an ability or an interest to really focus in something, and you have to do something different. Like for me, for about 6 months, I was doing the Liturgy of the Hours, and it was really speaking to me every morning. And then after a while, it just faded for a bit. And you could argue, well, hey man, you got, your discipline is an issue. Like, okay, probably is. But I find sometimes I have to go back to, like you said, that deeper hum. There's that prayer I love from the Surrender Novena that goes, Jesus, I trust in you. Take care of everything. And you run that 10 times. And you're supposed to do it as a novena. I just skip the novena and just do that part, like all day. I'm falling asleep. First thing when I wake up, Jesus, I trust in you. Take care of everything. That's just healing for me, just to run that, because I don't know what I'm doing, like you said. Well, So next question, you mentioned already maybe a couple of your heroes, and that's kind of the next question. Who are your heroes? You started listing St. Patrick's pupil. What was his name? Bonagrius or something? Beninus, excuse me. And then
my Irish friends are probably like, that's not how you say it, but it's fine.
I love the fact that everybody you're quoting so far is like from the early church. Like, these are not stories that come up on this show a lot. So yeah, who are some of your heroes? The kind of men that, is like your constellation of men that you're like, I wish I could be these guys, or these are the kind of figures that orient my life.
Yeah, okay, I don't have a particular order, and it would probably be a very large circle. So one of the things that I do every morning is I pray what's called the Irish circling prayer. And I start that by asking this small group of saints each to pray for me, half of them men, half of them women. The men in the group are Blessed Fra Angelico. He's not fully canonized yet, hoping to be a part of that. Fra Angelico is this incredible artist. And I think it was St. Pope John Paul II who said, somebody asked him, well, where are his miracles? And I think it was St. Pope John Paul II who said, look at his work. That is his miracle.
They're all over the walls.
Yeah, they're everywhere. So Blessed Fra Angelico, St. Augustine, St. Charles de Foucault. He's a more recent saint, a little Frenchman that went out to the desert and died for his faith. He's an incredible martyr of the church. He was put on my radar by my priest, who has a French background. And then there's St. Thomas Aquinas, St. George the Dragon Slayer, St. Maximus the Confessor. He, I can't remember. I know it for a fact it was his tongue, but I think he also lost a hand for his faith. He confessed and went toe to toe with some heretics and lost his tongue and his hand for his faith. And he wrote a lot of things, but one of the things that he wrote, is the mystical body of Christ. And in the very first chapter, he wrote something that stuck with me hard. He said, in talking about the soul's desire to become like Christ, he made the analogy of the soul being like the wax of a seal. And not only is the wax willing to be sealed, but it yearns for the impression of the seal. And I thought, oh man, that's probably the closest thing you're ever going to get to what it feels like to want to be with Jesus. Is not only am I willing to be impressed, but I want to be pressed upon. And then over the fall, I went to a monastery with some friends to spend some time in spiritual retreat. And I read the biography of St. Peter Julian Aymard. And it wasn't that there was a specific connection to St. Peter Imard. Like, we didn't have anything really connecting us. He's not particularly artistic, but it was something about his biography and his love for the Eucharist. I thought, I need this guy to pray for me every day. So I added him to the circle. And then St. Valerian. And St. Valerian is the lesser known half of the partnership with St. Cecilia. And most people know St. Cecilia, and they know who Valerian is because his part in her story is important. But what most people don't know about him is that once he sees St. Cecilia's angel, not only does he...
Before you go any cooler, remind us for who St. Cecilia is, for those who've not heard that story.
Okay, so St. Cecilia is an early martyr. I want to say 2nd, 3rd century. And she's this incredible, beautiful woman. She gives her heart to Jesus very, very early on, takes a vow and pledges herself to Christ alone, and becomes a nun without being like within an abbey.
Before there were communities, Christian communities.
Yes, before there were communities. That's right. And so she commits herself to Christ. And then her parents basically force her to marry. And on her wedding night, in the wedding chamber, she looks at St. Valerian and she says, you need to know that if you touch me, I have an angel who protects me. And this is my own language, but I like this language. And she basically says, he'll wipe you out. Like, it's over. And St. Valerian says, well, I don't believe you. Like, prove it. How do you know you have this angel? And she said, well, you can't see him unless you're baptized. So St. Valerian agrees to be baptized. And he's baptized. In the moment of his baptism, when he comes up from the water, he sees her angel. And I can't imagine how he actually saw it, but in the different depictions I've seen, it's just this incredibly fierce, fiery, multi-winged behemoth of an angel that would make every man pee their pants. I mean, just incredible. So Valerian takes his faith seriously, and he and Cecilia and Valerian's brother, and I can't remember his name, but Cecilia, Valerian, and his brother start to roam the streets at night, and they look for bodies of martyred Christians, and it was illegal to bury them. Christian bodies were thrown out into the streets when they were murdered and just left to rot. And Cecilia and Valerian and his brother would go out and they would find the bodies and they would give them a Christian burial. And then finally, Valerian and his brother get caught. They refuse to recount. They refuse to give up anybody, and they are martyred. And sure enough, their bodies are thrown out the street. St. Cecilia goes and finds them, gives them a proper Christian burial. And then Cecilia is finally caught, and she's martyred. And what's really interesting about her martyrdom is that they try to do a bunch of different things to her, and none of them work. And finally, they try to cut her head off, and the soldier hits her in the throat multiple times, harms her, but it does not kill her. And so for the remainder of her days, and if I remember right, she dies of her injuries. But for the remainder of her days, she would communicate with her fingers, 3 and 1, 3 and 1, 3 and 1, 3 and 1. And she's always referencing the Holy Trinity. And for her, Christ was everything. So that's St. Cecilia and St. Valerian.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's a movie I wish I could see.
I know, right? I
didn't know about them picking up the martyred bodies and stuff. Like,
that's how they got caught. They were picking up bodies.
Wow.
And I wanted Valerian in my circle because he was so dedicated to Cecilia, very much a St. Joseph figure. Yeah. I'm going to protect this woman. And to me, that's as quintessential masculine husbandry. Like, there's a lot that goes into being a husband, but first and foremost, it's protecting the beauty of your wife. So he's in there. He's and it's silly and maybe it's weird, but I always everybody's got I imagine it a lot like an honor guard. If you think about a lot of different movies where you have the, kind of the central figure, and then he's got this honor guard of people around him. And I wanted it like that because that's to do life, that's what I need. I need people around me who know what they're doing far more than I know what I'm doing, to be on my protection, And so in the circle, Valerian and Cecilia are next to each other. So they're, they're right there. So.
Gosh,
but those are
amazing cluster of figures. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh man, they're cool people. I wish. Well, I can't change my story. I want my kids to know the saints their whole life, because I think, and I think Catholics get a really bad rap for that, and I think that's unfortunate. But I think the more you know the saints, the closer you go to Christ, because these are people who give their everything for the faith. Why would you not want to know them? So those are my spiritual heroes. Those are the people I really look up to spiritually. You know, as a man and as a leader, I highly respect Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know how people feel about that particular president. I think he's an incredible man. If you look at the list of things he has done, he did in his lifetime, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who took very seriously the call to make the most out of every minute of your life. And that is something that I aspire to. When I finally pass through the veil, I want people to look back at my life and be like, oh my gosh, this guy never sat down. Like, he never took it easy. And you know, there's a lot of great books and a lot of great quotes from Theodore Roosevelt, but really if you look at his life, the man refused to take it easy. That's what I want. It's funny too, because artists get this kind of bad rap for being flaky, weirdo, you know, flighty, non-reliable. And
I have no idea what you're talking about.
And look, to be fair, there's some of that in there. Like, I have days where I'll tell my wife, I'm like, you know, I need to be a leaf on the wind today. I need to just go, and whatever happens, happens. Whatever the day looks like, I need complete lack of structure. Mm-hmm. The other days I'll be structured, but today I need to be unstructured. But Theodore Roosevelt for me is that kind of person where it's like, okay, if I took my energy seriously and I took the things that God has given me to do seriously, would I rather be sitting down watching TV, or would I rather be out there writing, or out there painting, or out there chopping firewood, or out there practicing this craft? You know, it's, as a leader, he's an incredible man. I think the other person that I look up to, that not necessarily from a spiritual perspective, but just another man that I think is really admirable, would probably be Lincoln. And I know that's cliche or whatever, but I admire Lincoln a great deal, partly because he was willing to put people around him who disagreed with him. His ability to lead and the way he handled the conflict through which he led, I think speaks highly to his character. And one of the reasons I say this, my wife bought me, I think it was Christmas a couple of years ago, she bought me this book of quotes from Lincoln. And if you go back and look at the way he talks about masculinity, the way he talks about faith, and the way he talks about leadership, I think he was a once in a century human being.
Really?
And I don't mean that because he was super intelligent. I think he just had a grasp on what it was and what the era he lived in called for, and he lived it out. And his life story is, oh my gosh, I know why we did that movie. That movie was not even scratching the surface on the capability of what we could do when it comes to talking about Lincoln. But those two presidents are role models for me. And then there's two. I loved it because in the preparation you threw out also fictional characters. I don't think we do that a lot. I don't think we look at fictional characters as role models, but I think that's very appropriate. And there's the obvious cliche, Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings. What I would encourage people to do, guys, to do is read the books. Because if you've only experienced Lord of the Ring in the movies, as good as they are, you are not getting the real Aragorn. You're getting a very watered down Aragorn. And the reason I look to him as a role model is because in the Fellowship of the Ring, they get the ring to Rivendell. And in the movies, they do a terrible job of portraying Aragorn as king. But in the books, when they get to Rivendell and the decision's been made, Frodo's taking it, Aragorn swears his sword, and he's like, I'll go wherever you want to go. And then he goes to Elrond, and he's like, all right, time for me to be the king. Give me the sword. And it's not given to him. He asks for it. It is time for me to do the thing I've been called to do. Give me the sword. And yes, he has doubts throughout the books, especially when they go through Moria and they lose Gandalf. But he never stops being who he knows he's supposed to be. And it's that kind of a character. I'm like, man, I really lack in that area. I have a lot of doubts sometimes, and I let doubt get the better of me. But I have moments where like, no, this is who I am, and this is what I'm called to be. This is what God has asked me to do. I'm going to go do the thing. Give me the sword. And I love that about him. The other fictional character that I admire greatly is a guy named Miyamoto Musashi. And it's funny because he's both fictional and historical. He is a real life Japanese swordsman. And I forgot the date range that he lives, but it's early during the height of the samurai period. And what makes him so notable is he goes on to become one of Japan's, if not the greatest swordsman of all time. And he develops the two-hand style. Most samurai, you see him in movies and in books, will fight a single sword, two hands on one sword. But Miyamoto decided, he was like, I have two hands. In the fictional story, he sees a drummer and the drummer's playing with both hands. And he's like, I have two hands. Why am I not using two swords? And he develops the two-hand sword. But the remarkable thing about him is he is, oh gosh, I can't remember. It's a ridiculous number of duels, well past what most people were fighting. But he never lost a single fight. But what makes him so remarkable is his outlook on life and how to really take hold of the things that are worth taking hold of and letting go of the things that are worth letting go of. It's very, very early Christian mentality. I'm going to do the things I know I'm supposed to do, and I'm not going to do the things I know I'm not supposed to do. And it's very stoic. I know stoicism is real popular in our modern era, especially among men. And there's some validity to that. I understand that. I've studied a good bit of the Stoic philosophers, and that's, I get it. I understand that's drawing. And Miyamoto is very much like that. He wrote a book called The Five Rings, and he talks about how to basically grow as a man. And it's unfortunate in that there's no Christian tie-in to it, but a lot of his teachings are like, so if you'll just be disciplined in how you live, you will live well. Is basically the five rings summarized. If you'll take life seriously and live disciplined, forget comfort, pursue difficulty. That's a similarity with Roosevelt. It was like, forget being comfortable. Go be hard. Go be uncomfortable. And that will make you grow, and that will make you change the world. In all total, those are probably all the different men that I look to as inspiration. And
yeah, that's amazing. Gosh, what a great list. Just amazing. Well, at the risk of making this show go on way longer than we have time for, gosh, I'd love to follow up with other questions. But I think we should wrap with our final question, which is, who do you aspire to be or dream of being a hero for? Someone that you sacrifice and work to showing up for. And again, I'll be annoying. You can't pull the God card or your family card because those are obvious.
I'm so glad you did that, because it's too easy to pull the God and family card. And I love, it's great because when we set this up, I was not participating in this group. And then I found this group, but there's a men's community here, and they're all over. And if you're out there and you're looking for something very manly, I would encourage you to look up what's called F. It stands for Faith, Fitness, Fellowship. That might be not in the right order. But F3 is a community of men that get together to push themselves physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's free exercise.
I think I interviewed Sean Berg, who does this over in Hawaii.
Okay.
As well. He first talked to me about this. Yeah.
And that group of guys that I train with 2 or 3 days a week, I would absolutely lay down and I would sacrifice for them. We trained this morning and it was just the most terrible suffering. And I loved every minute of it. And one of the beautiful things about it was we were doing it was really long and it was really awful. And most of us were finished. But guys would jump in and they would keep doing the workout next to the guy who wasn't finished, just so he wasn't training alone. And he would finish and then he would do his last circle run and all the guys got in line with him to run with him. It's that kind of a community where if you're down, if you need help, if you need somebody to stand with you, it's an incredible community and it's only for men. And it takes sacrifice to get up that early in the morning and go work out and sweat and suffer. And I cannot imagine not doing it anymore. And one of the beautiful things about it, at least in our community, is we always end in a circle of trust. Now, that's a principle for F3, no matter where you are. Every F3 ends in a circle of trust. But we end ours in a circle of trust and prayer.
Can you
Meaning-
describe what the circle of trust is, how that works?
Yeah, circle of trust is at the very end, the workout's over. We literally stand in a circle together. And I love it because it's even spoken like, okay, this is the time now for circle of trust. And that means if you've got a prayer request, if you got something in your life that is awful, or you've got somebody who, like, I've said things in the circle of trust I wouldn't say to anybody else because I know it stays in that circle. Now, it feels very much like confession. I'll put it that way. It's not the sacrament, and that's not what I mean, but it has that feeling of like, this is now a sacred time where I'm going to get to say the things out loud that I've been holding in to a group of men that I know care deeply about my well-being. And then we pray, and whatever's been lifted up is offered up in prayer. And once the prayer is over, circle of trust is over. And even as a group, we won't talk about it. Like, nobody's going to walk up to you and be like, hey, you know that thing you just said? Like, you want to tell me more about that? Nope, it's dead. It's in the circle, and we're not talking about it anymore. I know I am praying for certain things for certain guys that came out of that circle of trust, but we don't talk about it. I don't text them about it. I don't ask them about it. It's in the circle and circle's over. And I love that because there are a lot of guys in the world who are holding on to a lot of things simply because they don't have somebody in their life that has that shared bond that you can only find when you're suffering alongside other men. It's why military are so close, right? Guys in the military are so close because they suffered together. And this feels like that, not nearly as to the same degree. And I'm not trying to equate the two, but like, these guys got up early. They're sweating their brains out. They're throwing cinder blocks around. They're suffering for the sake of making each other better. And I cannot imagine at this point not having that group in my life. And if those guys were like, hey, I'm down and out and I need help, man, I would be all over it. So those men that I've gotten to connect with, I would absolutely long to be a hero for. Yeah.
Amazing. So I got to ask, and if you had 60 seconds to share some closing advice to the men listening to this show, what would you want to share?
60 seconds. Go all in. I think we are too easily distracted and comfortable. And I think if you really, really want to suck the marrow out of life and grow in your faith, go all in. Whatever that looks like for you, whether it's getting up early, whether it's exercise, whether it's prayer, whether it's scripture, whatever the thing is, don't settle for this is okay. You know, for me, I was thinking about this morning, actually. Anything other than sainthood will not be enough for me, whatever that takes. And so I think if you're out there and you're wondering, like, I'm stuck, how do I get unstuck? Go all in. Go absolutely full throttle, pursue God completely unabandoned. It will suck. It will be hard and it will not be fun all the time, but it will be absolutely meaningful. And that is worth more than comfort.
Thanks for joining us. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, send us a message at heroicmen.org/stories. Our partner at CatholicSpeakers.com has built the easiest way to book powerful Catholic speakers for your men's event. They are the #1 resource worldwide for event organizers and Catholic speakers. Book easily, confidently, and ask for several grants to support ministry to men. Visit heroicmen.org/speakers today. Come and share your journey in the Heroic Brotherhood, our online community for Catholic men like you. Get the app with the best Catholic media for men, including Heroic Men's original series, Be a Man. It's all free because an alliance of donors already paid it forward for you. Stand with us. Let's build the future of Catholic men. Will you pay it forward? $5 a month pays it forward for 5 men. Visit Heroic Men to stand with us. Because men like us, we leave no man behind. Visit heroicmen.org today.